So let me read you an interesting quote here. This is from a guy well known to many of you, Dan Garay. And it says, like Moses and Aaron, the Army's Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley, and its Acting Secretary, Ryan McCarthy, have decided it is time to lead their service out of bondage from a dysfunctional acquisition system. Milley and McCarthy's vision of the promised land doesn't contain milk and honey. Instead, it is a place where the Army will be able to develop and deploy new advanced military capabilities at a faster pace and for lower costs than was previously possible. You made the announcement just a month ago at the AUSA annual meeting about some significant changes to Army modernization. How's it been over the past 30 plus days?
Well, the Ark's not completely built yet, but we made a lot of announcements. We have not sat idle. So you heard the concepts that we introduced about a fundamental reorganization of the Army, which has not been done really since 1973 with Creighton Abrams. And what makes this different this time, in order for me to kind of set the table, and I can tell you what we've done since the announcement set, that over the last 20 years, we've looked at key variables in the acquisition system and put a particular emphasis against that in the creation of RKIC and RDECOM. But we focused in on those one specific variables and didn't look at how all the pieces came together. And that, you tweak one, it's all the knobs have to be turning in the same direction, like a clock. And so when the chief and the vice, my first month on the job, talked about the work that has been going on over the last couple of years, and that we need to look at a fundamental reorganization of how we do business. We're going from transitioning from the industrial age to the information age, and that recognition was that not all the pieces come together. So if you just look at requirements from the warfighting community and the technical community and how they collaborate and how they inform each other to make decisions, it takes too long. The span time goes 5 to 7 years to get a requirement. So a lot of the work had been done, and we saw AUSA as an opportunity to talk about how we wanted to do this, communicate to industry, to Congress, and to, quite frankly, just internally to the Army, about how we needed to have this radical shift in culture of how we do business. As you heard us make the announcements, we're starting with cross-functional teams. We selected post-brigade combat qualified officers, brigade command qualified officers who have recently served in combat, to be the leaders of these teams, with technical, programmatic, financial support within that. So General McConville, I have to give a lot of the credit to him. He really drove this process to line up with the MACOMs, look at these officers across these 6 teams, and say, who is the absolute best person we could get our hands on right now? And these are officers that they're gainfully employed, deputy commandants of centers of excellence. They're on the Army staff, and we've pulled them out. I signed a memorandum last night. These officers are now senior rated by the Vice Chief of Staff. So he personally drove this process, teed it up to the chief and I, knighted them about a week and a half ago, brought them to the Pentagon, had a offsite for about 2 days, gave clear guidance. I signed an additional memorandum with terms of reference. So they're moving out. And General Cardone is building this team. So the CFTs kind of fall under him while he works the larger structure, which, for lack of better expression right now, is a futures kind of command organization. But in this process, we realized we're going to change TRADOC, we're going to change AMC, we're going to change FORCECOM's fundamental makeup. So I had to make an adjustment to the terms of reference for this condition setting task force to realize that all these decisions that are going to be made will alter those characteristics of these commands. And you're going to have to come back and tell me what that means. And so General Cardone's charter actually is bigger than just this future organization. How does it affect the entire Army? And, excuse me. So you have the CFTs. We have this capability stood up. General Cardone is working with the major commands. He's going to come back and see what that management structure over top of that will be. And those first sets of recommendations will be coming in the February timeframe with the stated intent to have this stood up by next summer. But in the interim, these cross-functional teams are moving out to help try to get their teams formed and to build the one-to-end list of what are the types of capabilities that will fall under the 6 capability portfolios that we announced at AUSA from a one-to-end standpoint. Because for the purpose of this venue in particular, the Army has to be clear about what it wants. We have to tell you, we're going to invest against these capabilities because this is what we need to do to strengthen our formations. The criticism for our acquisition program for the last couple decades is we're schizophrenic. And this effort is that we are now going to be better informed, more collaborative, and do more venues like this to communicate to industry, Congress, and the American people why we need additional funding and to focus against a certain capability sets to deal with near-peer competitors.
You mentioned Congress, and the Army, as large as it is, operates as part of a larger network. What's been the sense, the reception by OSD and Congress to the proposed changes that you're embarking upon?
Warm with a healthy dose of skepticism. You know, I think they recognize we have to do something. I have worn out a layer of leather in the bottom of my shoes going back and forth to Congress. So my communication has been high, but they're going to want to be close to the process. They appreciate that we went to them early on. We gave them the heads up, you know, the cardinal rule of this town. But they're going to be watching very closely at the recommendations General Cardone comes back with, because they think we're coming up very close to the need for legislation. And it may come to that. Where we believe we are is we can do most of this within our existing authorities. So we chose to tell them early because we may need that, but definitely want their advice in the process. There's a lot of folks up there that have seen many of these movies before. So we'll see. It's probably too early to tell at this juncture.
A lot of folks in this room have also seen this movie before. How can industry best help this process?
It starts with us. We have to be clear in our communications with you. We have to be more open. I intend to be much more open and have more venues with industry leadership. We have to be clear about what we want. The Vice and I in particular spent a great deal of time looking at the 6 portfolios and what is the one-to-end and what are we going to fund, and not all programs will be equal. He and I are going to pick winners and losers in this process. And in so doing, it's the clear communication to industry, because industry is not investing in R&D. It's all below, the preponderance of industry is investing below inflation. But some of that is deserved because we're not clear about what we want. If we're clear about what we want, we need industry to put their engineers to work and invest against the capabilities that we need as an Army. You have the best and brightest our country has to offer. We have to mobilize this and get it all going in one direction.
In order to make all of this happen, resourcing is pretty important.
Yeah.
What's been the impact of continuing resolution, at least through the 8th of December, absence of a budget, the successive years of continuing resolutions and budget uncertainty? How does that affect where you want to go?
Try not to make eye contact with General Horlander. I ask Thomas this frequently, how many action officers do you have that have actually ever seen a budget? He probably has some that don't or never have. I've used the expression partly in jest, but it's serious. We are breeding mediocrity in the country. That we deliberately look at a budget cycle and how do we do less, and how do we make sure we don't have an anti-deficiency act, and it breeds a behavior where we're not trying to do as much as we can to work with industry to open up production lines, to invest in S&T, work military construction projects, to overhaul barracks and housing, schools. We're just doing the bare minimums, and we're trying to gauge what's going on in Congress. We're not doing our jobs. And for us, we've got nothing but challenges. We have to deal with 182,000 people deployed at any given time. We've got to modernize the force against near-peer competitors. We're trying to do everything. And we're doing it based off of uncertainty that we're going to fund this organization 3-6 months at a time. And then I have to try to put on a good face to talk to all of you about what I need. But you can't tell your shareholders whether or not the market's going to be open in 3 or 6 months. So we have got to get budgets passed. We have to create that predictability in the way we do business. Every engagement I have with Congress, I'm polite, I'm deferential, but I ask them for help. Please get this passed.
Well, all of us in this room stand ready to help you in that regard. I suspect, Mr. Secretary, there'll be a number of questions about modernization and resourcing. Let me turn to another subject that's been talked about timely, and that's base realignment and closure. Assistant Secretary of Defense Lucian Niemeyer at a Defense Community session just last week, I think, spoke, or I guess maybe even this, I guess it was last week, spoke and said that he sees the prospect for another round of BRAC as pretty unlikely. What's your view, and what does that mean for the Army?
So I think it was in September timeframe, right around the September 11th anniversary. They were trying to get the cloture votes, and they came about 15 votes shy. So we weren't even close. BRAC is very political. It's controversial, very sensitive. The timing is very important to that. Do I think it's necessary? Absolutely. But at the very bare minimum, we should do the analysis of where the excess capacity lies so that we can adjust. But part of that is having a strategy, a national defense strategy that you can lay over top of it to make the pure analytical justification of what you're trying to achieve. Do we have excess capacity? Absolutely. How much is debatable. Depends upon what you're trying to achieve with your national objectives. Should we revisit it? I think we should.
There's not much disagreement about the capacity of the Army. And seems to be broad consensus that the Army does need to be larger to accomplish its many missions. How do you grow the Army in enough time to meet the demands and retain quality that the Army so needs?
Simple economics, supply and demand. Do we have to do everything that we are doing in the world? I pose the question internally. We have thousands of personnel deployed in over 140 countries, I think it is. So that's why the National Defense Strategy is so critical, why I don't travel very much, because I want to be in every one of these meetings weighing in about the stress on the Army. Do we have to be in certain areas of the world anymore? How relevant is it to national security strategy of the country? We can do anything, but we just need more troops if they want to keep doing that. This is now, I've served in both the Trump and Obama and Bush administrations as a political appointee. And rarely do we have these conversations about what are we going to do less of. So I've been pushing that dialogue internally on the NDS track. I think we're going to have a conversation about that, but we can only tee these recommendations up to the National Security Council, and they will make that ultimate adjudication. But unless the dynamics change, Army needs to be bigger. The bog-to-dwell ratios are putting enormous stress on the force, and we can't keep doing this to our people.
General Siemens is taking notes. That's right. They, one place certainly
I won't go easier on them, but I...
No, don't go easy on General Siemens. That would not be good. We have one place where the Army's full suite of capabilities are needed, certainly is on the Korean Peninsula. President just was there just yesterday. Without obviously delving into sensitive matters, what's the Army doing to make sure that General Brooks and team have what they need from the Army to truly be ready to fight tonight?
You need to deflect this one to next week with the chief, I think. No, I'm kidding. The FORSCOM leadership, and really it's an Army as a whole, but General Abrams' leadership here has really been exceptional of looking at the types of units that would have to be deployed in a contingency operation. They've changed the CTC scenarios to train against these types of threats. From a logistical standpoint, AMC and Army staff have looked at what are the capabilities that we would need to support any type of contingency operation on the peninsula. So, the Army is planning and putting itself on a war footing to deal with that contingency, clearly. But so I'm very comfortable with that. The drumbeat has been consistent. The focus is there. So between General Abrams and the Chief, there's no doubt we'll put a tremendous focus on this.
Well, I think we would all subscribe to the best way to avoid conflict is to be prepared for it, and I think the Army is well on that path. Just one more question, Mr. Secretary, and then we'll open it up to the audience. You have been very vocal, as has the Chief, about the total force, the completeness of the Army, the one Army concept, regular Army, Army National Guard, Army Reserve, and Army civilians. What are you doing? What needs to be done to keep those bonds strong, to make sure that the total force remains ready and capable to meet the nation's requirements?
It's the couple of things, the simple things that I've noticed. General Abrams bringing National Guard leaders onto his immediate staff and FORSCOM. The communication between the Guard and Reserve leadership with the Army staff, it's seamless.
Well, I think that's what it needs to be.
It really is. We don't treat or talk to them any differently than the active force. So it's the behaviors that I've noticed. Because if I were to go back the 2009 and 10 time frame with the call-ups with the surging in Iraq and Afghanistan was not our finest hour. We could have done more in the communication and the manner in which we supported the Guard and Reserve with those deployments. But you look at it today, we've learned a lot from that as a force, and the behaviors of its senior leaders, that's to me what it really boils down to. And it's hard to even notice the difference when you go out to the commands or you're meeting with troops in the field. You don't even notice until you look down at the shoulder patch. It's really incredible.
Says U.S. Army right here.
That's right.
That's a big deal. So let's open it up to the audience, and we'll give our first question to Lieutenant General Formica from our sponsor, Caliber. General Formica.
Sir, thanks for the opportunity to ask the first question. Mr. Secretary, congratulations on your appointment, and thanks for your continued leadership and service in our Army.
Thank you.
I'm going to accept General Ham's invitation to come back to the Modernization Command. Most of us in or out of uniform are rooting for your success, and we have confidence in the leadership of the Vice and that you will bring to it. But if I could ask, what challenges do you anticipate that command will have to overcome, and what kinds of authorities do you anticipate it may need in order to succeed?
I may need you to come back on active duty.
No.
The cultural shift. What I briefly highlighted before is pulling out authorities, responsibilities from all of the commands and fusing them into a new one. This is a entrepreneurial greenfield type of effort in an institution that's 242 years old. So culture is going to be the hardest piece of this. You can write a memo and you can tell people, go over here, move the org charts around, but getting people to behave differently, to work differently with each other. So that's why I highlighted it as well with the Vice looking so hard at the people we've chosen. We had like 3 or 4 meetings on this. I don't know how many phone calls he made across the Army. It's entirely about the people, because we'll have to lead through this together. So I'm constantly sitting at my desk looking at ORBs and who these officers are, and do they have the right experiences from a warfighting standpoint to the jobs they've had in Washington, their education. We need these kind of triathlete officers civil servants involved with this process. So that's first and foremost. Authorities, it may come down to that. It will require legislation, because what I'd like to do is codify this so that when I look to Congress or I look to the defense industry, everybody knows how this organization is composed, how to communicate with it, and it's locked in. So that's people understanding what it is, but most importantly is the cultural piece leading through that. And that's why we're going to grab best and brightest and tell them we're not going to, because it's kind of hard taking the post-brigade command qualified officers. They think they're going to be deputy division commanders or division commanders, and say, you're going to be a CFT leader. And they're thinking, my God, what have I done? And plus I have to be with you and the vice every week now. And I said, yeah, but they've been really great. These officers, front 3 inches of their chair all day, right? It was exciting. It was a really interesting part of my first 100 days here, the energy they have and the excitement behind it. So a lot to follow, but it's all about people. Yeah.
Very good. Yes.
Morning, sir. Cameron Luthi, Bloomberg Government. If you could just talk to us a little bit about the process for the strategic portfolio analysis review and how General Murray's doing. Is it informed by the new national defense strategy?
There you go. There you go, General Murray. That's a public critique of your performance.
Should I have him answer the question? We have a couple of different processes like that are informing this. We have an S&T review that's underway right now. So between General Murray's SPAR review and the S&T review, you'll overlay these two together to make the determination if I'm looking at long-range precision fires, 1 to N, I have X number of dollars. So the programs that are below the line, we will make a determination of whether or not we can pull those up so you can make portfolio trades. I've got until about Thanksgiving or Christmas, so I'll probably see you in the hallways of the Pentagon here soon. But that's, you're taking these processes and you're merging them by the time we close the books here and pass it across the river. So General Murray's process is intimately involved, intertwined in this process.
Sir, we have a question over here.
Yep, please.
Hi, Mr. Secretary Sidney Friedberg, Breaking Defense, emerging from behind the pillars over here in the overflow room.
It's a good place for you.
Yeah. That's right. you know Sidney. You know.
Oh, yeah.
I believe the technical term is defilade. A question, of all the things that the modernization system struggles with, the greatest one is information technology and cyber security, offense, defense, which are now in everything. So, of all the different things that this reform has to be able to do better, how is that cyber IT aspect the stressing case? How are you hoping both on the process side and on the talent side to address that better?
Lateral integration, as Mr. Kelly will tell you, is probably going to be the most challenging for us in this process. And when we brought those CFT leaders in, that we made the greatest emphasis on just that. Because otherwise you're just going to focus on one piece of hardware and how are they going to connect these capabilities within the formation. So that was a critical point of emphasis. To your point about talent, General Ham and I were talking about this over bacon and eggs here a few minutes ago, that do we have the organic talent internal to the Army, or do we need a combination of that with academia and industry? I would say probably the latter. We need to look at where we can get the best and brightest talent in the country, in particular in this domain. And I'm going to be at the University of Chicago on Friday. I've been with Texas A&M. We're reaching out to academia, and why we're here today with industry. We need the best and brightest the country has to offer, build consortiums, change the way we're doing business. But we don't have it. We probably don't have it today, Sid.
Please, Michael.
Mr. Secretary, Ray Dubois from CSIS. My understanding of the announcement at the AUSA meeting was that this new command reports directly to you as Undersecretary and to the Vice. 3 interrelated questions. Number 1, what will be the rank of the officer heading this organization? Number 2, does it have a specific FY18 budget? And number 3, what is the relationship between this organization, this new command, and the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology? And does that individual remain the Systems Acquisition Executive for the Department of the Army?
Number 1, it's General Cardone is leading this condition-setting task force. And we'll have to come back and look at this, whether it is is it a 3-star command or we pursue a 4-star command. So we don't know that yet. The second question with regard to the budget, we will have to lay in a placeholder for we can look at an above threshold reprogramming in 18, but in 19 we will have to lay in a budget of X. You know, I don't know if it'll be a mirror image of what FORSCOM or AMC will be, but we'll have to work that determination. How it reports to the Vice and I is we're trying to put 2 of the big 4 leaders in the Department of the Army involved with weapons systems development every day. And if you look at the responsibilities of those 2 jobs, we're the ones that have to integrate the Army, bring every piece together, cut through the bureaucracy. So put an active role for the 2 of us in this process to help bust through bureaucracy and move requirements through the system faster to get decisions made. How pieces will come together is going to really be that $64,000 question. That does it alter the fundamental makeup of the Army by pulling responsibilities out of the major commands and putting it over here on this side of the ledger? That's a point we'll get to downstream. I think that it will alter this. How does it ultimately close out? We aren't there yet.
So I think we probably have time for...
What's that? Oh, an ASALT, sorry. So the PMs will be embedded to the CFTs. They have a hardline reporting structure to the ASALT because you'd have to change the law. I have no interest in that. And plus you want the PMs to have that relationship with the ASALT so they conduct the oversight. But I've been hard over on this. They will be embedded on the CFTs, so they're right there with the requirements community, working the trade-offs of cost, schedule, and performance.
So, Mr. Secretary, I think we have time for 2 more.
Did that answer your question, Ray?
Well, the Systems Acquisition Executive, which is an official title and responsibility given to the ASALT, does that continue?
Yes.
Okay, one here, Jen, and then one over on this
I
side.
just did an interview with you, God. You're wearing
Come
me
on.
out.
I always have more questions. Jen Judson with Defense News. You mentioned changing the fundamental makeup and altering characteristics in certain commands, TRADOC, FORSCOM, AMC, as a result of this modernization command. Can you talk a little bit more about what the Army is thinking there? Can you help me sort of wrap my head around this one?
They've got a lot of questions. So if you look at the acquisition process, and what I've said before is it's like a 4x100 relay where we pass the requirement through the Army. And this is why it takes long, and at times you drop the baton. Bringing it all under one roof will, theoretically, we'll see, it'll make it easier, make it faster, collaborative, more informed, move the information faster. But that will change the way TRADOC does business. How does that change the fundamentals of their role in modernizing the force? That will happen. So the ultimate determination will be made as we tee up recommendations. But they have the ARCIC organization today. They run requirements. They start the requirements process. So will that stay there? We'll move to this modernization committee. These recommendations will be teed up to us here in the February timeframe. But the intent that the chief and vice I've laid out to the teams are we need to put all of this to one place. This cross-functional team has to come together and make a recommendation, reduce the span time. We've got to get capability to the field faster.
Last one, Michael. Courtney.
Hi, Courtney McBride with Inside the Army. Mr. Secretary, can you elaborate a little bit more on the CFTs? I know you indicated that you've tasked the CFT leads. We know who they are now, but are they no longer performing those day jobs? Are they just OPCON to the CFTs? And the additional staffers, I mean, are there kind of concerns that they may not be as effective if they're still reporting to centers of excellence or PEOs? How's that going to work?
This is their primary responsibility.
Primary or only, or what's the?
Primary, right, Vice? Yeah. The dual had it initially. It's a bridging solution to next summer for some of them. The others will be there. So if you look at the individuals that are on there, a couple of them may not be in these positions by next summer, but their others will be there in a, I think 3-year tours we're looking at. Yeah, 3 to 4 year tours.
Yeah.
One more, sir.
Sure. And if I could offer just an old soldier perspective, you mentioned that the CFT leads will be senior rated by the Vice Chief of Staff. The Army has a long tradition of abiding by the rating scheme. So if that's where their direction is coming from, I suspect that's where the preponderance of their effort will be.
That was the idea.
Yeah. The long arm of the Vice will be noticed.
Secretary McCarthy, Megan Myers at Army Times. As a former member of Special Operations, what's your message concerning SFABs to the Special Operations community about sharing the Train, Advise, Assist mission and also kind of welcoming them into this community of elite soldiers who wear a colored beret and who are getting that beret from the get-go in a new unit?
Nobody said it would be easy. Okay.
Shifting gears here. The SFABs, they will focus on conventional forces. The Special Operations community, the Green Berets in this case, advise and assist Special Operations forces. So we, over the last, probably half a dozen years, we've noticed that, or even longer than that, the advise and assist mission has been something we've been doing in Iraq and Afghanistan in particular for the last 16 years. And there's never been the institutional commitment for the conventional side. You've had APAC hands and mitts and all these things, and we never institutionalized it in the way we trained, incentivized, equipped, organized these organizations. So the chief's leadership here, he recognized this void, this commitment, the national commitment of the president's decision in August on Afghanistan, this new strategy, that the conventional forces had to have this capability. So that's where the SFABs will play. This is not a Green Beret light. This is a different focus. So they're going to work with the conventional forces, but this is a niche capability. These are second command qualified officers, senior non-commissioned officers were all handpicked by the Sergeant Major of the Army. The Chief and the Vice weighed in on these officers to go to the SFABs. They're vetted. They're all they're high performers, physical fitness. These are not average individuals. These are exceptionally talented officers and non-commissioned officers. I went down and spent the day with them in September. I've been personally working their equipping issues. It is a niche capability, but we're not trying to mirror, if you will, other units. It's a unique capability that the Army needs to institutionalize, and for as long as I'm in this seat, I'm going to do everything I can to incentivize, organize, and train, equip the best we have to do this mission.
Well, thanks, Mr. Secretary, and thanks all of you for an interesting and enlightening conversation. I would invite you all to come back on the 11th of December, where Caliber is sponsoring a job fair right here in the Gordon Sullivan Conference and Events Center. We think that'll be a great event. And then, Mr. Secretary, as you talk about moving forward with acquisition reform and modernization and the command, seems to me that an ideal opportunity for a next major discussion of that will be at the Global Force Symposium at the end of March in Huntsville, Alabama, and we'll send you a formal invitation and hopefully have a further conversation there. I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't ask you 2 lingering questions. One of them's really hard. Where are you on pinks and greens?
Thanks for having me, General Ham.
That's right. And more importantly, there's an event in Philadelphia on the 9th of December.
Really? What's going on?
Yeah. What do you think about that? What's your crystal ball telling you about the outcome of that event?
So I watched the Army Air Force game, and I was so impressed. I try to leave General Caslen alone, and I sent him an email of how impressed I was with the offensive line. I mean, they dominated Air Force. I mean, everybody was going on and on about the 21-0. We stopped the scoring record, or what are they, 306 straight quarters or something where they scored points. And everybody's going on about the defense, but the offensive line dominated Air Force. So I'm excited to watch how the team performs in the trenches. The game's won and lost, the offensive and defensive line. So it's exciting. They're playing very aggressive. I don't want to jinx this, because I really want to see that Commander's Trophy in the Rose Garden. But it was exciting. It was a fun game to watch, and I've been talking a lot of smack with Secretary Spencer of the Navy, and got some things teed up for him at the game too. So exciting times ahead of us. It's a great morale boost for the building. Cadets come down and get everybody fired up. It's a great time of year.
Well, thanks, Mr. Secretary. I think all of us in this room, minus a couple, there were a couple of non-Army uniforms in this room, but I think most of us are with you, and certainly wish Army the best for that great event. And we wish you the best and the team in this remarkable endeavor that you've embarked upon. It's important for the Army, it's important for the nation, and all of us are glad to have you at the helm. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Well, I can say one thing. Thank you for these forums, these venues. We need to do more of them to communicate the outside, what we're doing, how we need help, and beat Navy.
Good luck.